educators, thought leaders, and citizens through inspiring talks, lectures, competitions, and civic initiatives. The lecture series of the campaign seeks to instill patriotism, inspire responsible citizenship, and encourage every young Indian to think for Bharat, speak for Bharat, and work for Bharat. And for the seventh day in series, we have with us Ms. Ami Ganatra. It is our privilege to welcome Ms. Ami Ganatra, an acclaimed author and researcher of Indian knowledge tradition. An engineer graduate with an MBA, Ms. Ganatra has spent years studying the Itihasa and Puranas through original sources with a focus on presenting them in a logical, authentic, and contemporary manner. Her work has inspired thousands of readers, including me, to discover the timeless wisdom of Bharatiya civilization. She is the best selling author of books such as Mahabharata Unraveled, Ramayana Unraveled, and Why Are We This Way, which have received wide appreciation for making India's civilizational heritage accessible to modern audience. Today, we are honored to have her with us to share her insights on the topic, the glorious literary history of India, ancient wisdoms and modern expressions. We're confident that her thoughts will deepen our understanding and inspire us to engage with our heritage in a more meaningful way. Please join me in extending a very warm welcome to Ms. Ami Ganatra. Warm welcome, Ami Ganatra ji. Over to you.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, for Disha Bharat, for inviting me for this talk series. It's indeed a privilege. The topic today is the glorious literary history of India, ancient India and modern expressions. Um, why does literature matter? What is this literary history? And why is it so important for us? I was sort of thinking about this topic, and I was just I'm just back from UK. Uh, there was this Shibir in UK, and the Shibir was of Hindu youth, so Hindu Yuvak and Yuvatis in the UK, and they'd come together, discuss a lot of things, play games, discuss topics on identity, especially the Hindu identity in Britain. Every session would start with a prarthana, but the prarthana would be for Vishwa Shanti. Our sessions would end with a prarthana. Loka samasta sukhina bhavantu. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha. And I was thinking that, isn't it just so amazing that here you have all Hindu bachas who've come together, okay? And still the prarthanas that we talk about are not saying Hindus only. Be good to Hindus only. Hey Bhagwan, give something to Hindus only. Hey Bhagwan, make everyone Hindu. No, we are not saying that. We are saying whoever it is, whatever it is, may the whole world be happy. Let there be Shanti in the entire universe. We say Loka Vishwa Samskruti Rakshanartha. Let all cultures across the world be preserved. This is not happening in India. This is happening in UK. But even in India, whenever we have any prarthana, the prarthana is for everyone. It is never about just one community or one religion. Isn't it amazing that, or even strange for that matter, that Hindu Sanskriti is probably the only Sanskriti which has this kind of universal value already. It doesn't have to try, it just is. Right or wrong is a different matter. But you look at Indians. We are so happy to visit churches. We are so happy to visit mosques. Of course, we visit every temple that we have. And wherever we go, we bow down. We bow down with the same amount of bhava that we would bow down in a mandir, right? Even in our own mandirs, we have all kinds of devatas. There is never this thing that, I believe in Krishna, so I will not worship Shiva, or I will not think about Kali. No, we have grown up with all the devatas. There might be some examples here and there. We are 1.4 billion people, so obviously there'll be some very rigid examples here and there. But by and large, right, our mandirs have all that. Plurality, inclusivity just comes to us very naturally. We don't even think about it. It never crosses our mind that, oh my God, that God is a false God. I cannot enter the church because it will destroy my faith, or how can I worship that false god? Never. That thought doesn't even cross our mind that some other god or some other entity who anybody else worships, that's a problem. Why not? How is it that we are inherently plural? And trust me, it is not because the constitution says we are secular. No, no. The reason we have remained so, or the reason secularism has thrived in India in whatever form, it is because we are majority Hindu. These terms were a part of constitutions of many other neighbors of ours. What happened? We know very well, right? So just putting something in the constitution doesn't make anybody inclusive and plural. It is because it is an inherent sanskara of the Hindu Sanskriti. Where is it coming from? It is coming right from our oldest text, the Rig Veda. In the Rig Veda, there is a mention of many different deities comprising the nature, the forces of nature which makes living survival possible. We call them, our ancestors called them the devatas. And they ensured that as people, we don't get into wars with one god versus the other because all of them were important. Every single entity in nature is important for our survival, our thriving, and our prosperity. They were all gods. So in the Rigveda itself, there is a sukta which comes ekam sat bahuda vipra vadanti. The truth is one, that divinity, that satya, that reality is one. But there are different approaches to achieve, to get to that divinity. And the name of this could be different. The paths could be different. The names of the gods could be different. But at the end of the day, they are all the same. That very idea comes from the most foundational and probably the oldest texts of the Hindu civilization. In the Indian history, be it in the past or even in contemporary times, you see, or rather, you would have never seen that there has been a fight amongst people of science and people of religion. Of course, there will be superstitions. Of course, there will be people you believe are not scientific enough. That's a different matter. But by and large, there hasn't been a situation where scientists have been killed. Why? Because they said something which was not agreeable to the religion in power. Not once. Not once. In fact, we have a different tendency. आजकल एक और ही बात चलती है. Any new discovery that happens, we'll be like, oh, हमारे तो वेदों में लिखा है. Now nobody knows वेदों में क्या लिखा है. But the tendency is, oh, we had it all. Our ancestors had it all. What it was, how it was, we don't know. But I think this is better than being closed-minded. At least there is an acceptance that knowledge evolves, knowledge grows, science happens. Science could say something which is different from what the past belief was, and that's perfectly okay. You grow, you evolve. I think this very idea, again, how are we being so open minded? This very idea, where is it coming from? Go back to the Rigveda once again. In that, there is a sukta which says, Ano Bhadra Kratto Yantu Vishwataha. May good thoughts, may nourishing thoughts from everywhere come to me. Let me be enriched by the knowledge which comes my way. We call the Indian civilization a knowledge civilization, a Gnana Sanskriti. But what is this civilization and why are we this way? As you have gotten a little bit of insight, we are this way because of some of these sanskaras which our ancestors spoke of and left for us in our literature. The idea that the creation of this literature was not with the thought that, oh, we have to create literature. The idea was very different, and we'll probably see some of it. But the way we are the way we are because of this breadth of knowledge systems, this breadth of literature, of shastras that our ancestors have left for us. And it is not that these shastras are stuck in time or rigid in stone. No. They have shaped the people who were living it, and the people in turn have shaped the Shastras that were allowing them to develop a worldview. How did that happen? Also, we will see in a little bit. So, when we talk about the literary history of India, my focus is going to be largely on what we call the Indic scriptures. Because, as I said, in a lot more than what we even believe, our actions today are also being influenced deeply by what the Shastras have said. I already gave you two examples, right? And one was about the open mindedness for knowledge, where it comes from every side. And the other was the inherent inclusivity of various paths to see, perceive that divinity. That's why we never had the concept of false gods. That's why we say everybody be peaceful, everybody be happy. Paths can be different and it's okay. We can all survive that way, right? So these two things, but they fundamentally define the Indic worldview coming from one of our most ancient literature. Now, what really is a civilization? Because I kept talking about civilization, Indic civilization, Hindu civilization, Sanskriti. What really is that? So, civilization is that which obviously comes from a shared territory, the shared territory of Bharat, the people who were born here, for sure. It comes from shared history. We all have our ancestors. Today, we might be anything. We might be following whatever religion we want. Okay. People have grown, people have changed belief systems. All that might happen. But inherently, we have a shared history of the past, one of the longest surviving civilization. It is not as if there weren't other civilizations that very well were. The Greek civilization, the Mesopotamian civilization, so many others. Today, they have been relegated to museums while we continue to exist. There were problems, no doubt, but we've sailed through that and we've survived. And we see that we are continuing to thrive now. How has that happened? What has made us resilient? Somewhere, the history of the literature also tells us the story of this civilization. So, as I said, shared territory, shared memory, shared worldview. It might not be similar, but there are aspects which are sort of similar. Shared gods, shared idea of divinity. All this makes a civilization, shared social structures. It might again change through time, but this shared worldview that is developed through the literature, through the history, through the belief systems, that is what gives a civilization its identity. Now, as I said, this identity comes from us, or rather, the story of that identity can be seen through the literature of India. Now, what is the literature of India? As I said, I'll talk about the Shastras. The Muslims have the Quran, the Christians have Bible, the Jews have Judaism has Torah. What about us? We don't have one book because we are anyways not people of the book. We have, as we say, as the cliche goes, we have a library. What is that library? I love to call it the Shastra Pantheon. The whole Shastra Pantheon, which has given an identity to our civilization the way we are today. So, what is it? Very simply, we have two broad categories, Shruti and Smriti. The Shruti Shastras are what we call the foundational texts of our civilization. This includes Ved and Upanishad. Rather, Upanishad are a part of Ved. So it basically has Vedas, the four Vedas, Rigved, Yajurved, Samaved, and Atharvaved. Shruti means that which is heard, which was heard, that which was seen. Our ancestors believed that knowledge which is important for public welfare, for public good, that knowledge cannot be owned. It exists. Human beings can only be a madhyam, a medium to access this information. So we believe that the suktas, the information, the wisdom in the Vedas is not somebody's private property. Nobody really wrote it. In the sense, we know who the rishis are through whom we got that knowledge. But the rishis themselves do not claim to be authors of it. They claim to be mediums of it, through the media of it through which this knowledge came to us. In their state of samadhi, in their state of intense meditation, some of these suktas, the verses, the shlokas, the wisdom came to them, and they ensured that it is preserved and protected by passing it on, teaching their students and their children. Hence, they became seers or drishta of the knowledge that was existing. Why? Because this knowledge is for Loka Kalyan and they did not believe in owning it. This knowledge was there. What it also means is that if for some reason we lose the Vedas today, we forget the oral tradition, we forget the written tradition, it all goes away. It means that if once again somebody who has the capacity, who can get into that state of meditation, once again this knowledge can be revived. That is also why it is Sanatan. It is always there. It is infinite and eternal. This is what the Vedas have. Now, Vedas have two parts to them: the uh, the Samhita part and the Upanishadic part. The Jnana Kanda, which is the Upanishadic part, and Samhita, which is the Karma Kanda. Now, Karma Kanda at that time meant yagnas, doing the having that fire altar, the Vedi, and doing the yagnas. What do these yagnas represent? And why was it so fundamental, so foundational to the Indic worldview? Let's talk about that because that will tell you why, how have some of our most basic principles or most basic, why, how have some of our most basic value systems become the way they have? So, what are yagnas? Let's take a step back. When probably the society was not yet established, human beings were still hunter gatherers, they were still living in the forest. If there was one thing that made civilization possible, that made settling down possible, it was the discovery of fire. It is because of fire that human beings could protect themselves from the wild animals at night and from the cold. It is because of fire they learned to cook food. It is because of fire that they could clear the land and establish their small settlements. It is because of fire that they learned to make bricks, that they learned to make medicine. Fire was that spark which made Sanskriti possible, which made settling down society possible here and everywhere else. But as human beings began to settle, and as they started to grow, as in agriculture, grow fruits, vegetables, grains, all of that, they had little more control over their lives. They realized that the life itself, their life itself, is not in their own hands. The survival is not in their own hands. There are so many aspects of nature which determine whether we will survive or not. If it doesn't rain, what can human beings do? If the earth slows down its revolution and rotation even by a second, what will happen? We will get destroyed. So human beings realized that our survival depends on these forces of nature. We survive because of them. These forces of nature became our devatas as they rightly should have been. Over time, our ancestors also realized something very profound. They saw that every being in this world had a role to play. They took from the nature and they gave back to it. The sun takes the water, as it evaporates the water, we get clouds, and clouds rain. The rain then further ensures that food grows. A honeybee takes nectar, takes honey from the flowers, but also helps the pollination. A bakri eats the grass. and then further becomes food for the higher animals, or and even it's even and whatever comes out of it becomes manure, becomes a fertilizer for the soil through which food grows again. So you see, everything, every being took something and gave back. The cosmic order was maintained by this taking and giving back. No being was like, I will only take, I will not give back. It is because of this taking and giving back that order, that cosmic order was maintained. Of course, through the anugraha of the forces of nature. This order was what our ancestors called Rita. Okay, Rita is that cosmic order. And every being had to play its part in maintaining that Rita, in maintaining that order. Human beings were a part of that order. We were continuously taking from the nature, from the beings around us. How do we give it back? Of course, we were doing some stuff, but by and large, we weren't. So, how do we give back? How do we express our gratitude? How do we share? That's where this ritualization of Rita happened, the giving and taking, which took the form of a yagna. What happens in a yagna? We invoke the fire, we call the devatas, we make offerings to the devatas, we pray to the devatas for what we want, and we ask them to go back. What offerings do we make? The same offerings that we are taking from the nature, the milk, the ghee, the honey, the grains that are grown, right? So a yagna is basically a symbol, a ritualization, if I may, or a symbol of maintaining that rhythm. And that is why these yagnas became so important, because that was our way of doing our part in maintaining the cosmic order, in upholding the rata. Why? Because we called the devatas through from whom we were taking so much, and we were offering food to them. We were again nourishing them, which they rightly deserved. That is the give and take that happened. So yagna became so important. Now, in that, the fire, because if you see the other forces of nature, the Pancha Mahabhut, out of that, we cannot control water, we cannot control space, we cannot control Vayu. The only thing that we can really control is the fire. We can invoke it when we want. This fire became our medium between us and the divine, between us and the devatas. We called it our priest, Agni Me Purohitam. That is the first sukta of the Rig Veda. So the Vedas spoke about how to conduct these yagnas, how to call the devatas, how to do their stuti. That was the part of Karma Kand, which was extremely important, as we believe, to achieve material wellness. Because obviously, the wellness, the material, the wealth was coming from the nature, and hence the Karma Kand. But as society is settled, as we, especially in India, which was such a fertile land at that point in time, the soil, the weather was so conducive to us that we prospered. Now, when you prosper, when your stomach is full, when you are well off, what happens? Basically, all the existential questions come to us. What is the purpose of this life? What is divinity? Is there a divinity at all? How did this all start? What is my relation with this divinity? What is that ultimate truth? What is death? What is the purpose of life? What is the most important thing in life? Is it material pleasure? But that material pleasure is not giving me happiness. How do I ensure I'm always happy? What leads to happiness and sorrow? All these questions started coming, and our rishis started started doing deep meditation on these topics. That is what gave rise to Upanishads. Now, although I'm talking of it as ye hua and then ye hua, it is not as if iske baad ye hua. Things might have happened in parallel, right? It might have happened over time. Some might have happened in parallel. Some might have happened in chronologically. Who knows? There are other experts who work on it. Not my topic. For me, it is the journey, the story itself that is important. But this became our foundational Shruti Shastra. However, when we have to live a life, many other things are important. Medicine, taking care, medicine, aesthetics, kala, right? Music, dance, all of that. Um, Warfare, because there are people are fighting, you have to protect yourself. Governance, who takes care, who ensures that the society works together? What is the code of conduct? How should different communities behave? What are the professions required? What is the role of a man? What is the role of a woman? How to take care of children? What is the way to ensure that the society continues to grow? Right? You need all this code of conduct. One, you also need other sciences to ensure that the wisdom of the Vedas is carried forward. So, for carrying forward the wisdom of the Vedas, for ensuring that this information, this jnana is saved, various other sciences such as Vyakran, grammar, Nirukta, Jyotish. Jyotish, today we see it as astrology, prediction of life. Astrology started for the ritual itself, for doing the yagna. What was the right time to do the yagna? What was the murata? That was the main part of it, making the panchanga. Like that, you got the Vedangas, which were developed to preserve and the Vedic Jnana and perform the ritual. Then you had what is called the Upavedas, which includes Ayurveda, because you need medicine, right? You need medicines to survive. It has Sthapatya Ved, which is about making your buildings, your dwellings, your space. We consider the space also as sacred. So, how do you make the best use of space? What is the right place? Vagere, vagere, all of that. You had Dhanurved, which was for obviously warfare, because when people are together, people will fight. You need to protect yourself, right? You had Gandharva Ved. Gandharva Ved was about art. It was about music. It was about dance. It was about Natya. Those aesthetics were core to the Indic worldview already, even at that point in time. Also, as I said, to live, you need code of conduct. You need rules and regulations. How does that happen? How should people live with each other? For that, you need a precise code of conduct, especially for that time in which you are living. Those texts became the Dharma Shastra. So now, whatever I'm saying, Vedangas has various texts. Yeah. Upavedas have various texts, because every form of science, if I may, every form of jnana, wisdom, was developed further and further and further and further by practitioners of that science, if I may. So, under all of that, you have a rich history of texts within every Vedanga, within Jyotisha, because it kept developing over time, right? Within Ayurveda, as we already know, within Natya Shastra, we have lots of texts that kept getting written, updated, innovated, and whatnot, right? Then the Dharma Shastras. When it comes to Dharma Shastras, we often only talk about the Manusmriti, but that's not the case. We have lots of Smritis, and the Smritis also differ from each other. Why? Because they are Desha Kala dependent. What was the purpose of the Dharma Shastras? To teach us how to live in a dharmic way. What is dharma? Dharma, as is, I'm going quickly here, just throwing words at you. Details you might find in my book, Why Are We This Way? But right now, I just want to throw some terms so that you have some food for thought about this rich literary heritage that has come to us. We are the inheritors of this wisdom. And unfortunately, we don't even know what this is. So I'm just throwing it out there. A little you might not understand, a little you might understand, but at least you will have food for thought as you leave this lecture. So the Dharma Shastras tell us how to live a dharmic life. Now, what is dharma to begin with? Dharma is not religion. Religion is a part of dharma, but dharma itself is not religion. Dharma means the sustainability principle. Rita is maintaining the cosmic order. But how do we live that Rita? What is the right thing to do? What is not the right thing to do? That allows the society to continue to survive, thrive, and prosper, to sustain. That principle of sustainability, that idea which promotes sustainability, is dharma. So, how do we live in a way that is dharmic? For example, we always say that you have to speak the truth. You should do ahimsa. You shouldn't do hinsa. We say speaking the truth is dharma. We say ahimsa is dharma. Why is that the case? Because in a society, if everybody starts lying to each other, what will happen? That society will collapse. There will be no trust in that society. If everyone just kills each other because I don't like you, what will happen? That society will collapse, right? So you need a society where everyone behaves in a way that allows for the thriving of the society, for the continuation of the society. Actions which promote continuity and sustainability are dharmic. Actions which lead to destruction of that were adharmic. With keeping this in mind, there were certain social structures created to allow everybody to prosper, to allow everybody to have their own professions, to allow everybody to prosper materially, emotionally, spiritually, depending on their own capability and stage of life. All these things were covered in the Dharma Shastras. So Vedangas, Upavedas, Dharma Shastras, and few others, I will say, all this became part of the Smriti text. Shruti, and then everything else comes in Smriti. What is Smriti? Smriti are the texts which are based on memory, in the sense the foundational texts are still the Vedas. But how do you live those Vedas? How do you live the foundational wisdom of Rita, of Rina, which I haven't spoken about, but that maintaining that cosmic order, of understanding divinity, of understanding the ultimate truth. How do you actually live in life? How do you translate that rata into dharma? That part happens in the Smriti text, which allow us to live our everyday life, that operationalize our everyday life, right? In which you have the Dharma Shastras as well. The Smriti, the Manusmriti, Yagnavalkya Smriti, Parashur Smriti, all of that falls into that. Then you have what is called the Darshan texts. We saw the Upanishads. Upanishads talk of the ultimate reality, Bhagwan, connection of us and the Bhagwan, vagere, vagere. The Darshan texts expanded on this view further. Now, as we know, there are various approaches to understand reality. There are some answers which can be 100% known, some others not. How do we develop a perspective to understand this reality was the topic covered by the Darshan text, which have yoga, which have Sankhya, which have Vedanta, as we call the Anta of the Vedas, so studying of the Upanishads, right? And it also covered the topic of bhakti, our relationship with the divine. That is why sub part of Vedanta were then Advaita, Dvaita, Vishishta Advaita. Basically, how do you see the relationship between Atma and the Paramatma? That got covered in the part of the Darshanas. Now, the Dharma Shastras told us what is right, what is wrong, and all of that. Okay, what is dharmic, what is adharmic. But when you actually live it, things are not that simple. Like we have for theory, the theory of marketing, right? There is a nice, beautiful theory. You have frameworks and everything of, say, marketing, of supply chain. But when you actually have to live it, when you actually have to implement it, things become very different. How do you understand that? For that, you have case studies. When you do your business studies, you have various case studies. In law, you have various case studies to see how is application really happening. What happens when X action is taken? What happens when Y action is taken? How do we ensure right decisions are taken? For that, our rishis left for us the stories of our ancestors in the form of itihasa. Itihasa, that which has definitely happened in the past. Okay. Purva Vrittam Kathayuktam, something that has happened in the past, narrated in a Katha format to give us the lessons of life from the life of our ancestors. We have two such texts, the Mahabharat and the Ramayana. These texts essentially tell us how to live a dharmic life, especially if you are in a position of leadership. Because dharma sankat will always be there. There will be conflicting priorities, there will be conflicting duties. How do you choose that duty? How do you prioritize what should be done? Right? What is that right path? How do we understand that? Those learnings come to us from this itihas. Over time, the faith, the shraddha, the way we saw God also changed from what it was in the Vedas to what it eventually became. From the nature, from the energies that represent the divinity of the nature, natural forces, we became we became more Puranic. We became more attached to the Puranic devatas. We had Ishta devatas, we had Vishnu, we had Shiva, we had Brahmadev, we have Devi, which continues till today, right? The stories of these devatas, legends that happened with them, history of some of the rajas during the later periods, all that comes in the Puranas. How to the festivals we celebrate, the core stories of that go back to what is the Puranas. The Puranas have those stories and legends. Puranas also have metaphors of life, because more often it is easier to understand a concept when you say it through a story, when you say it through a metaphor. So you have Puranas, which has the which explains the core of our Shraddha, of our belief system as we see it today. So those are the Puranas. Then we have other texts on mandir architecture, on individual ways to do puja. And then we have later on, we also have this whole Kavya literature that is developed. But you see how the need of the society led to the development of various shastras. And these shastras were not stagnant. ऐसा नहीं था कि हो गया मतलब हो गया. That is why you had multiple shastras get developed, one building on the other. We never said destroy the past. We never said past hai to kharab hai. Not at all. We took the past, saw what was relevant, built on it. And that also got evolved as time progressed. Whatever helped the sustainability of the society became prominent. Whatever was not useful at that point in time went away. That is why the Sanatan that we say is also defined as Nitya Nutan. We don't believe that because it's something old, hence it has to be, it is written in stone and should be followed like that only. Nor do we believe that because it is new, it is necessarily bad or necessarily good. What we genuinely believe is what Kalidasa says. Just because it is old does not mean it is valid all the time or it is good all the time. He says it for a kavya, but this is true for any practice, any social practice and social wisdom as well. Just because it is old does not mean it is always valid. Just because it is new, it does not mean it is necessarily wrong. Or vice versa. Just because it is old, today we think it's bad. No, not necessary. It might be valid today. Just because it's new, it's necessarily good. No. Santa, good people, smart people take every action or every virtue or every vice, whatever, every value and see whether it makes sense. They examine it, they assess it, and then they decide whether it's the right thing to do or wrong thing to do. And the moodas, those who are stupid, they will just stick to whatever others are doing or peer pressure or just because book mein likha hai. We have never been people of the book. But because we have never been people of the book, our books kept developing, our books kept getting updated, our books kept getting refined and remaining relevant as even when times changed. Even today, those texts give us so much wisdom, that which is relevant today. One of the texts I must talk about is the Arthashastra. Arthashastra is in a way a part of the Upaveda. And the Arthashastra we have today, in that Chanakya himself says that it is not as if I am creating something new. I have created something which was always there. I have built on it. I have done like we do today when we do research papers, we do literature study, right? We look at what else have other experts spoken of. What is it that you agree with? What is it that you don't agree with? Where is the gap? This is exactly what Chanakya has done. This is exactly what he says he has done. He says, I have taken what the past rishis have worked on, and then he's given his view. So he'll talk about a rule, a policy, and then say, Bharadwaj said this, Fishuna said that. Kautilya doesn't agree. And then he will go on to say what Kautilya says. So this is how our texts also getting evolved, innovated with time as per the needs of the society. That is why we don't have one book. We have the entire pantheon. But even in that pantheon, we do not believe in destroying the past. We build on the past. We keep taking what is relevant, and there is so much in that is relevant today, as the talk that I started with, right? Our whole open mindedness, our whole plural, our approach of inclusivity, that all comes from what our ancestors taught us at that point in time, and that our text kept on preaching and updating with time that went by. So, this in short, I know this was a lot to cover, and this is still just a peek into the literary history, but I hope it has given you some understanding of the vastness, of the profound richness of our Hindu Shastra pantheon, of our Hindu literature and its history. So, I'll stop here. If there are any questions, please let me know. As I said, I know I've gone all around the place, but I hope something is making sense.
So glad we could hear you, ma'am. I have a couple of questions. One of my question is, many people view our ancient texts as mythology rather than literature or knowledge system. What do you think is lost when we read them only as stories?
Um, Let me first explain mythology, because many times we get offended over something which we don't need to get offended over. Mythology does not mean it's false. Okay. Mythology means belief system of a group of people. For those people, it might be true, but for others, it may not be. For example, there was this new movie recently called The Odyssey, right? The movie Odyssey, we say, comes from the Greek mythology. Why? Because it talks of their gods, the curse of the god, and all of that, right? For me, who does not believe in the Greek gods, will I take it as history, or will I take it as a legend of the Greeks? But for the Greeks, that is very much history, or at least for those who are believing, right? So such stories are called mythology. The issue with the issue that has happened in the Indic discourse, or especially the colonized Indic discourse, is that we have forgotten to differentiate between mythology and itihas. Okay, Mahabharat and Ramayana are very much itihas. Why? Because our rishis have actually separated itihas and purans. And itihas, they say, are purva vrittam kathayuktam, something that has happened in the past, but narrated to us in a katha format. Hence, it might have some larger than life stories. It might have some myths, even if I mean myths in the sense, legends which can't be proven scientifically. However, by and large, the core event has definitely happened. So in Mahabharata and Ramayana, the core story of the Pandavas and Kauravas, of Sri Ram, Rakshasa, Ravan, all that, that is true. It has happened on planet Earth. Okay, on planet Earth. However, when you look at the Puranas, things change slightly. Okay, what do the Puranas talk of? The Puranas have some itihas, it has some history when they talk of the lineages of the Rajas on planet Earth. Okay, but they talk of Devatas in the sense the Vishnu Puran, Bhagavad Puran, they will talk of Vishnu and Krishna as Sarvashresh and everything coming from them, right? Whereas you have the Shiva Puran talk of Shivji and from whom everything else is coming. You have the Devi Bhagavad, which will talk of Devi as Sarvashresht. Now, if we say, no, 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 this is history as we understand history, what will happen? How will we prove which is that one truth? Now, this becomes a problem, especially because in the larger world, the larger Indic Sanatani worldview, we believe that the Parabrahma is one, right? Shiva, Vishnu, Devi, all of that are manifestations, are different names given to it so that it is easier for mortals like us to access that divinity. That is, and that understanding is there in us. We have that understanding. That is why, even if I'm a Vaishnava and I believe everything comes from Vishnu, I will not fight that, oh, no, no, only this is history with somebody who's a Shaiva, because that larger understanding is there. And hence, this literature can be called mythology. Mythology, not in the sense it is told as false, no, but as belief systems which are true to the people who believe it. That is how we understand itihas and mythology.
Okay, I have another question. There are many retellings of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and how can readers distinguish between original text interpretations and creative adaptations?
So, in fact, this is very simple.
Mm.
When we say itihas, we are talking of Veda Vyasa Mahabharat and Valmiki Rachit Ramayana. Okay.
Mm.
So, this is the first filter. Itihas is Valmiki Rachit Ramayana and Veda Vyas Rachit Mahabharat. I am not discounting the other text, but when it comes to Itihas, it is these two texts. Why? Because Veda Vyasa and Valmiki ji were alive when this was happening. They are giving us the first person perspective, or rather, the first person narration of what is going on. Nobody else was alive at that time, right? So, when it comes to aitihasic truth or aitihasic value, Veda Vyas Mahabharat and Valmiki ji Rachit Ramayan will remain the OG itihas. Any other text which is written out of bhakti, out of rasa, out of local folklore, all that are good, people can still learn from them. In fact, I should say that a lot of bhakti and the Ramachetna and the stories that we have today for bhakti, they come more from retellings, and that's okay. We don't have to dismiss that. However, if somebody says why Krishna behaves this way, or why Sri Ram behaves this way, or what was the situation of women, what were the characters of women then, if we have to get a real understanding of the society then, of the characters then, we will have to go back to Itihas. Let me make one more distinction here. Lot of times, especially in the last 70, 80 years, you have texts written or other books written which say this is written from Draupadi's perspective, or this is written from Karna's perspective, or this is written from whoever's perspective. Anytime you hear this X perspective, Y perspective, you can still read it and appreciate it, but know it in your mind very clearly that this is fiction. Because who is to say what was Draupadi's perspective or Karna's perspective? आपको कैसे पता चला? It is basically the author's perspective. और उसमें भी, if the situation, if the incident has been changed completely from what the Valmiki Ramayana or the Vedavyas Mahabharata says, then obviously it is fiction. Because how else do they know? There has to be one source of truth, right? And that is Valmiki Ramayana and Vedavyas Mahabharata.
All right. Can ancient literature help us navigate, the contemporary ethical dilemmas, or are we at risk of forcing modern interpretations to ancient texts?
I think they are very, very relevant. The situation might have changed. For example, what is Arjun facing really? Right? On one side is his family, and he has a responsibility to preserve his family. But he is also a Raja, and he's faced with people who are bullies. He did not want this war. This war was imposed on him, right? By a bully who says, I cannot live with you, and who only wants his way, who's completely unjust. Then what do you do as a Raja? Isn't your responsibility to ensure that injustice is destroyed and justice is established? So, what do you do? Right? We face similar kind of dilemma in daily lives. If somebody is a leader, they might face this. Say, for example, if you have some politician, right? On one end, they know their son is wrong and he's done some corruption. And there are politicians who have to enforce the rules and regulations. What should they do? Right? This is at a leadership level, but even in our individual lives, many times it so happens that there is a conflict between our professional life and our personal life. May not be as destructive as the dilemma that Arjun was faced with, right? But it still is. There is a professional goal to meet and there is a personal life to live. How do we navigate that? And what Arjun is going through, right? If we remove, even if we ignore the 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 intensity of the decision he has to make, then what is he going through? He's stuck. He doesn't know how to make a decision, right? He's trying to figure out what is the right way to make a decision. And in that, Krishna is not telling him do this or that. Krishna is basically telling him, I will teach you how to make a decision, how to act, right? Whatever be the situation you are in, what should be your approach to doing your action, to your karma? That is what Krishna is talking about. And that stays relevant to this day as is, right? One. Second, the whole yoga darshan that we have, although the main purpose we have is realizing the true self at the most important, or rather at the highest level. But what it also does is that it allows us to understand our mind properly. It allows us to understand what is stopping us from making right decisions. And how do we make those decisions? At the end of the day, it is controlling the mind, right? Today, what science and medicines are talking about, mind control, mindfulness, meditation, our rishis have already spoken of. So there is lots in the ancient shastras which is relevant to this day, and there is much else which is not relevant to this day, right? And this is how we have grown. Our shastras themselves, within the shastras, you see stories that have changed and evolved over times. The Vedas will say something, but that story has been taken and built upon in the Puranas in a very different way, giving a completely different message. The idea being, you you build on a past to make it relevant for your current times. So what we often think of as tradition today might have been an innovation over something that was more ancient because it was needed for that time. And this the study of this history of Indic pantheon actually shows us that how the whole evolution itself has happened. So as I said, yes, very relevant even today, and it shouldn't stop here. We should continue to research. For example, we have Ayurveda. We know that Ayurveda is definitely curing ills or the diseases which we have even today, right? And we should continue to ensure that Ayurveda keeps developing. It shouldn't be like stuck in the past itself. With the new methods we have, with the new methodology we have, we should continue to innovate in that as well.
So, if you were to introduce Indian literary heritage to someone with no prior exposure, which text or which story would you begin with and why?
Valmiki Ramayana. I think it's and when I say Valmiki Ramayana, I mean Valmiki Ramayana, not any other text, not the text written out of bhakti either. Because in Valmiki Ramayana is a simpler story. It is smaller. And in the Valmiki Ramayana, you go through all kinds of dharma sankatas. You see how decisions have been taken. You see all flavors of human personality and psychology. And navigation through those various flavors and psychology done by a man who was a leader, one of the most ideal leaders if there ever was, right? Hence, I feel Valmiki Ramayana is easier to introduce. And along with that, the Bhagavad Gita giving some background of the Mahabharata. But Itihas, I think, is the most accessible. And through that, you can go into other stuff. But then this is my preference. Some others might prefer Puranas, and that's perfectly okay. For somebody who doesn't know, Itihas to me is the most accessible.
Okay. Has your own understanding of Ramayana and Mahabharata changed significantly over the years, and what prompted that change?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think many years ago, when I had not read the Valmiki Ramayana or the Veda Vyas Mahabharat, I my understanding of the two epics was same as what anybody else has today, right? We have an idea of Sri Ram that, oh, he was very rigid, very black and white. Come what may, he will be that white person. And about Krishna, who's breaking rules all the time. The idea that Draupadi was the one who, because of whom the war happened, because her tongue, she said something which she shouldn't have said, and stuff like that, right? And also, also the understanding was only at that level, that the various you study the various characters and that's it. Don't really apply it to yourself. It was just about a story of the past that some are good, some are bad, some are heroes, some are villains, and that's it. But as I read the texts, one, I understood that what we tend to think about the Mahabharata and Ramayana is not what it is. Second, the characters became clear, the understanding deepened about why they are behaving that way. And that further led to my own understanding of dharma, of right and wrong, of context in which dharma is to be lived, how decisions have to be made, at an individual level as well as at a national level. What are the things that matter? What are the relationships that matter? How should you live those relationships? What is it that really matters in life? So, although I was still reading or still talking about those texts, it became way more relevant to me in understanding my own self, and probably I don't know if I have been able to live it, but at least I at least it is giving a direction.
Mm. So, in an age dominated by, short form content and, AI generated information, how do you think young people develop patience, curiosity that is needed to engage, needed to engage with India's classical literature?
I think the short form videos definitely work as hooks. And I can tell you about my own experience. A lot of my own readership has come through the Instagram reels, which even I have not created. When I do podcasts and stuff, people make those reels and they share it. And based on that, because for some, it was like, what is she even saying? This is completely different from what we've been believing in, right? Some others were like, yeah, she seems to be answering my question, even in that reel. Let's see what else she has to say. The others would be like, oh, she's saying this. I don't believe her. I'm going to prove her wrong, and then they get deeper. So, of course, you will have many others who will not take that pains, but others who are genuinely curious, for whom these reels do act as hooks. And then they get curious. So, the good thing that has happened is that uh, the social media that we have today has also made long form stuff more accessible. There are podcasts now. Previously, people had to only sit with a book, right? Now, when they're traveling, they can't read, but they can listen to the podcast, which is even like an hour long. They can take breaks and listen to it. You have ebooks, right? Which or other audiobooks, which you can also read while you're traveling in your busy life doing your work. So multitasking has also become easier. But of course, when ati sarvatra varjayet, when it becomes, when people are just doom scrolling, right? Ek ke baad ek ke baad ek ke baad ek, not really focusing on anything, or using reels to spread wrong narratives, or using reels to confuse people, that is also happening because access is to everyone. Hence, the responsibility of our individual responsibility and that of parents when it comes to children becomes extremely important to help understand the right from wrong, the useful from the non useful. But I think every age has its own issues, and this is one which can be our strength if used properly, and of course, lead to destruction if not used properly.
So, talking about the Gen Zs, there is a perspective saying that ancient Indian literature often raises questions rather than offering simple answers.
Yeah,
Do you think the spirit of inquiry is something modern education should consciously revive?
absolutely. And you mentioned the Gen Z, so I will say that I am, for one, extremely happy with the current generation. They're way more open minded. They're willing to listen. Of course, you will have all kinds, right? So I'm not talking about those certain people who are abusing this, that. Unko jaane do. But by and large, the people I interact with, my own readership, people who reach out to me, the messages I get, the talks that I get called for, they're all Gen Zs. And they are way more open minded to understand, learn from ancient wisdom than I would say some of the older generations who are so stuck in their head, who want to see Sri Ram only in a certain way. You say something else, they'll be like, who is she? She is breaking Hinduism and all that bakwas they'll do, right? Because their minds are so set in seeing things in a certain way. However, the the Gen Z crowd or the younger crowd is way more open minded. They will have questions. Yeah. But if you can give them logical answers, source backed answers, they are willing to listen. If you tell them, no, do it because I'm telling you to, they won't. And I think ऐसा होना भी नहीं चाहिए. Our Upanishadic Shastras, be it Prashna Upanishad, be it Katha Upanishad, be it Taittiriya Upanishad, and so many others, they all have a lot of Q&A. Bhagavad Gita has so much Q&A, right? Asking questions was never forbidden. It was always encouraged. The only thing is, how do you ask questions? Are you asking questions to dismiss, or are you asking questions to learn? There is a small difference there. But asking questions was always encouraged, and I'm glad they're asking questions. I think the conviction that comes through asking questions and seeking the right answers, that is way stronger than by saying, हमने ये किया है, तुम भी करो. Right? Because you now know it, you believe in it, you trust what you are talking about or practicing or preaching, right? Rather than doing it just because somebody is telling you. And I have faith that Indic Shastras are so beautiful and so profound that we will find answers to most of our questions. Obviously, there will be some which may look, some traditions, some rituals which we like doesn't make sense, and that's perfectly okay. I have no problem with that. I have no problem saying that this is not making sense, jane do. That's okay. But by and large, at least when it comes to concepts, when it comes to values, the depth of Indic wisdom is unmatched.
I just have one last question. If you had to summarize the essence of India's literary heritage in one sentence, what would it be?
I will go back to what Kalidasa said. Puranamiti na sadhu sarvam. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's great. Just because it's new doesn't mean it's bad. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's bad. Just because it's new doesn't mean it's good. Whatever you believe, assess it, examine it, and then practice and follow it. This is what the Indic wisdom also says. This is what the Indic wisdom says. So the onus goes back to your buddhi. We have buddhi, use it. This is what all the shastras say. This is the Indic worldview that has kept us open, that has kept us evolving, that has kept us resilient when other civilizations have become part of museum. We continue to live and thrive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amiji, for reminding us that India's literary heritage is not simply a record of the past, but a living conversation that continues to shape our future, present, and inspire us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Done?
Sound, ma'am?
Yes?
Done.
Would you like to share tomorrow's plan?
Oh, sorry.
Yes. So